Hey, thanks for stopping by and checking out my painting. Today, we're going to do another painting in the series that I'm calling Study the Greats. It's going to be another George Inness painting that I'm going to cover here. And I must tell you, George for a long time, George Inness has been my favorite painter. There's a couple things that I appreciate about him. One is he's probably the foremost American landscape painter, and he's also, I've come to find, a pretty intense character. So, just a little bit more about him coming up in a bit, but what I'm going to be painting here is another image of the Delaware Water Gap, which at one time was heralded as one of the 8 wonders of the world. And since moving out to Northeast PA, where I live with my wife and our kids and our dog, for 14 years at one point, I drove past and through the Delaware Water Gap just about every day. And, had the opportunity, especially when stuck in traffic in various points on Route 80, to, take in all of its wonder. It really is an interesting spot, and there's a lot of incredible scenes. And the Delaware Water Gap National Recreation Park offers a lot of opportunities for some great hikes and very unique scenery. So this painting is attractive to me for a number of reasons. There's a lot of connections. I had a great grandfather on my mom's side who actually had a piece of property not too far from here. He had a farm that was claimed in the infamous Tox Island Dam project through eminent domain. And I don't know, I've always felt an attachment to this area. And one of my favorite things to do is to go on hikes in Worthington State Park, which is a part of or just adjacent to the national park here. So, what I'm doing is going through the normal process. I toned a 14 by, I think it's 14 by 11 canvas, stretched canvas, which I purchased from Michael's on sale, and toned it. And now I'm just putting in some of the major shadow patterns very quickly as possible, with the intent of covering the canvas as fast as I can. As you'll see here, I will selectively put in some slight tinted colors relatively early in the painting, and really I'll do that just with the intent of providing myself with a guide, a very loose guide for how I'm gonna apply the paint. And still, my objective is just to cover the canvas as fast as possible, and establish some colors to anchor to, and also establish the tonal qualities of the painting, the lights and the darks. So here's a little bit about George Inness. He was born on May 1st, 1825. So this video is being recorded in February of 2021. That was quite a time ago. He lived a relatively long, full life, and he was, like I mentioned earlier, a prominent landscape painter, one of the most influential American artists of his time. He was influenced by the Hudson River School and the Barbizon School, and he was a very spiritual, intensely spiritual person, and many say it's found in vivid expression in his work, especially later in his career. So his style is known to have evolved throughout his painting career, and we're talking thousands and thousands of paintings over the course of 40 years with an S. And he went through an evolution, but he always was known for kind of capturing the emotional qualities and the atmosphere within a scene. He fell, I guess, if you look at his compilation of work, in between um, different styles. He was neither pure realist or an impressionist, and he definitely has some quite a few works that are of tonalist type qualities, which I'm attracted to. And he did have some critics of his work, but mostly he was hailed as one of America's greatest artists, and he's often been called the father of American landscape painting. His best works, or his most famous works, are can be described as tonalist works. And he had an interesting life. He was born in Newburgh, New York, and those that ever drive up to upstate New York or New England over the Tappan Zee Bridge, in that area, I think it might be called the Mario Cuomo Bridge, but I'll always call it the Tappan Zee Bridge. Newburgh is nestled right in there, and it's an older town, beautiful. It's set in a beautiful setting with some of the Catskill Mountains and some of the larger mountain ranges kind of coming down into some of the widest parts of the Hudson River. So I'm sure that inspired him at a young age, just given that he lived there for a while and had roots there. I think he was the middle child of 13 children, and he moved to Newark, New Jersey when he was young too. I think it might have been 5 or 6 years of age when he and his family moved to Newark, New Jersey, which is another thing, that connection to upstate New York and New Jersey, where I grew up. Those are things too, I think, that kind of make me feel connected to Inness, and because that's where I grew up as well, in northern New Jersey. So in 1839, he studied several months with a pretty well-known painter. He worked as a map engraver in New York City, and then he started making connections at that point with different artists, landscape artists. He also studied classes at the National Academy of Design. He studied the work of the Hudson River School artists. I think it was Thomas Cole and Durand. And he was very much not only an innovator, but he was also a synthesizer. And he actually had been quoted saying later that these two, Cole and Durand, they can be combined, and I will try. So he had many showings throughout his career and had a full life. He painted in this area of western New Jersey, along with other areas, throughout the country and the world. But he painted quite a bit throughout this area of western New Jersey, northeastern Pennsylvania, the Poconos, the Catskills, and many of his works are featured in galleries in Montclair, or in the New York area in Montclair, where he actually lived in northern New Jersey. It's funny, I took a quick second to look at the clock, and I felt like I needed to run upstairs and wake our teenage twins up, but then I realized, it's an asynchronous learning day here in the Neiman household, so we have a little more time. And this is one of those terms that is going to forever be tied to this COVID pandemic that we're living through. We have a lot of options here in our school system, thankfully, and our two 14-year-olds are we've elected to go with remote learning, at least for this marking period here. And Wednesdays they have the opportunity to learn asynchronously, so there's no timing related to the bell, and they can start whenever they want. So we let them sleep in. So I have more time, and you see the image of the water gap. I think the reason why a lot of people are so drawn to it is because you have rather massive, at least for the East Coast here in the United States, massive mountain range, which has this continual band of ridges. I think it's a couple of ranges, but I think the predominant one is the Kittatinny mountain range here, and they abruptly kind of break to allow for the Delaware River to run through them, right within a town called Knowlton, New Jersey, and Delaware Water Gap, Pennsylvania here. And so you can see that. You can see the space through the water gap and the little ridges on the other side, which are tinted rather light blue because they're far off into the distance. And I had done a similar study of a very similar painting of Inness a little while ago. It might have been the first one that I did in this series, Study of the Greats, and it was a much darker, very dominated image, dominated by burnt sienna and yellow ochre. The foreground had an even more shadowy kind of nature to it. So this is a brighter day, or a brighter point in time, maybe on the same day, but I have a feeling it's a different day. I understand Inness painted in this area quite a bit. So you'll see in this rendition of the Delaware Water Gap in the sky a lot more of a lighter golden hue with the sun peering through a band of clouds, but you'll see a lot more hints of lavender and very light blue. You'll see the mountain range itself also is shown a little bit brighter, and the whole tenor of the painting is much higher. So a little bit brighter, cheerier kind of image overall, but still one that I like quite a lot, and I like the other image too. It's a little bit more dramatic, darker, moodier, but check it out. I think it's on this playlist in YouTube, Study the Masters. So I'm going through, I'm smoothing out some of the rough lines in the sky, and just trying to create the feeling and the image of kind of the wispiness of the clouds, and just working my way through, looking to create contrasts, trying to avoid the urge to work too hard at that, because if I were to, we would see a blending of the ultramarine blue and yellow ochre, and it would create kind of a green tint. So we wouldn't want that. And you'll see I'll bounce around, from the sky to the midground to the background to the foreground here, just trying to very consciously work on the effects and create similar effects to what Inness created in his masterpiece. I'll come nowhere near what he was able to produce. There's several reasons. Obviously, far less experienced than he, and I'm mostly self-taught. But he worked in a much larger format, and had quite a bit more experience than I at this point. But this series, Study the Masters, is really an attempt to level up my ability and the tools within my tool belt. So I will continue to work my way through. I'm adding some highlights in the sky, and I'll end up wrapping up this painting in this video, before the painting is complete, I I end up in a space with this painting where I'm quite happy with the results, but at the same time, I understand that in order to get it where I want it to be, I'll have to let it dry, and I will I'll have to come back and put some glazes in there in order to get some of the effects that I'm going to try and mirror. So here we go again. I'm working my way through. I have some three-dimensional kind of qualities in the clouds and in the sky, and I'm just trying to augment that a little bit by modulating the tonal quality, making the darks a little darker, the lights a little lighter, and bringing some variance to the shapes of the clouds, and the reflected rays of lights that are poking through because of the sun being behind the cloud, the main cloud band there closer to the horizon. And there's a lot of ultramarine blue. I may overdo it a little bit here, and you'll see me from time to time just come through with a paper towel, and I'll just lay it out flat and lift it up in an attempt to lift up some of that excess pigment. I'll also lay in some lavender, and I will do so in a way where I'll put down some random spots in areas where I think shadows would exist in these clouds, and then I'll lift it up, put paint down, and then wipe it off. This is something that before I started doing a lot of online instruction and experimenting on my own, and I never realized, and I think a lot of people don't realize it, one of the things that these great painters do, and a lot of painters that work hard in this area of developing paintings with these interesting effects, what they'll do is they'll spend a lot of time throughout the painting process putting paint down and picking it up with a paper towel or cotton swab or some other instrument. And there I go again, doing the same thing, just trying to take some of that excess paint off. That'll do a number of things for us. One, it kind of enhances the effect of the clouds not being, they're not solid objects, and they're always moving and evolving up there. So we want to make them look as though they have that kind of quality. And by the way, the lavender or the purple I'm using is dioxazine purple. I always have a hard time pronouncing that. I'm going through and shaping some of those trees in the foreground. Eventually put some sky holes in them to, there we go, I'm doing that right now to make it look like some of the light reflecting off of the river there is viewable. I'm going through and enhancing the sap green chroma in the shadow and in the foreground, adding some yellow, trying to create a little bit of color harmony, so the foreground is kind of giving an indication of picking up some of that light coming down from the sky. And I think that does a nice job of pulling this painting together. Actually, it looked a little too intensely unconnected, that foreground did, from the rest of the painting, because it had such a strong high level chroma, which consisted mainly of a mixture of a lot of burnt sienna and a tiny little bit of black.